This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Today, our guest is Franklin J. Rooks Jr. He is a graduate of the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science, where he earned a bachelor's degree in health science and a master's of physical therapy degree. After graduating from PCPS, he earned a master's of business administration with a concentration in finance from Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Along with his college roommate, he went on to be a founding partner of PRO Physical Therapy, an outpatient physical therapy business based in Wilmington, Delaware. At the time that it was sold, the private equity firm KRG Capital, the business had 18 locations in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. After selling PRO Physical Therapy, Mr. Rooks earned his Juris Doctor degree from Delaware Law School. He is licensed to practice law in the state of New Jersey and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He also represents healthcare providers in breach of contract matters and also provides general legal advice pertaining to contracting and compliance with federal and state regulations. Since 2009, Mr. Rooks has been an operating partner of Shore Capital Partners, a private equity firm headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. Currently, he serves on the board of directors for Therapy Partners Group, a portfolio company of Shore Capital with 137 outpatient physical therapy clinics, primarily located throughout California, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. After graduating from law school, he and his partner from PRO Physical Therapy purchased a single-office occupational medicine business from a hospital system in Delaware. He and his partner grew the occupational medicine business to 5 locations, and in 2015 sold it to In Tandem Capital Partners, a New York-based private equity firm. And then in 2018, he and a partner acquired a durable medical equipment business in New Jersey. And in 2023, after tripling the business's EBITDA, Mr. Rooks and his partner sold the DME business to a strategic acquirer. He is currently a partner with Iterum. How do you say that? Physical therapy.
Interim.
Okay, physical therapy, an outpatient physical therapy business with locations in Florida and Delaware. He resides in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and is married with 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. So, Frank, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the invite.
Well, we were just talking before we started here that we knew each other from way back in the early 2000s. And after reading that bio, man, you've been busy.
Yeah. I just can't sit still, have something to do.
Okay, so since you are a physical therapist, but you took a pretty different journey than a lot have, why don't you tell us a little bit about you're a physical therapist and you start a private practice and then you decide to grow it and sell it and then go in a different direction. So just tell us a little bit about what your plan was, what your strategy was, and then how you got to that side of the business and eventually a law degree.
So I don't know that we really had much of a strategy when we started.
Okay.
My partner, who's one of my college roommate, said to me one day, "Hey, we should do something. Let's do something in Delaware." So we started a practice in Delaware, which was basically us doing outpatient physical therapy and subsidizing that with some home care because we weren't busy enough to both be in the clinic at the same time. We started doing home care to make ends meet. And from there, we, like I said, marketed and did the best we can. We tried to differentiate our service. A lot of the clinics in town at that time had waiting lists. And we made some service guarantees where we would see all new referrals within 24 hours. We then offered transportation services to pick people up, and we had evening hours and Saturday hours, which was something that none of the other clinics were doing. None of them were open on Saturdays, and many of them took their last patient at 6 o'clock. We started taking our last patient at 7 p.m., stayed open until 8. So we differentiated ourselves in the marketplace, and through the power of relationships, grew from one office to 18 over,
Wow.
I think it was about a 9-year period.
Okay. Great. And then, so then you decided to sell those practices.
Yeah, we decided to sell. It was something that you know we didn't reach easily a decision to sell, but we felt that it was the best thing to do at the time. For a number of reasons. Um, we then sold, and from there, I went to law school after I sold the business. I,
So
I
tell
stayed
us,
on for
yeah.
for about a year and a half.
Okay.
Um, and law school was something that I always wanted to do, and selling the business gave me that opportunity that I was able to
So,
go. I went full time for 3 years, and earned my law degree.
so you just decided it's something you always wanted to be was a lawyer. So you just decided now is the time. So, um, I mean,
Well,
that's a lot of school. You look at you go to physical therapy school, and then you get an MBA, and then now you're in law school. You must be a pretty good student.
I mean, I was a better student at law school than I was at physical therapy school. I can say that.
Okay.
But when I went to law school, I was 40 years old, and um, if I didn't do it then, when would I do it? And
Yeah.
like I said, it was something that I always wanted to do. Um, when I was in high school, I thought about law and physical therapy, two very different things, and I ended up, choosing the physical therapy path largely because my mom worked for a physical therapy practice. So that's how I kind of got introduced to the field. But, and selling the business just gave me that opportunity to do something that I had wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so then you become a lawyer, and and so then what's the next career move at that point?
Well, there's some things in between. So after I sold the business, we sold to KRG Capital. A friend of mine, or a friend that I got to know, was an investment banker, and he introduced me to the people at Shore Capital, who at that time were just starting out, and they were interested in the physical therapy space. And my friend, Sean Sullivan, again, an investment banker, he said to me, you should meet these guys, and I met them, and we explored opportunities for physical therapy acquisitions, and we acquired a physical therapy practice in the state of Michigan, and I worked with them through that process. So um, that was, I want to say, in 2000, I want to say 2009 or something like that. That
Hmm.
they acquired this Michigan rehab specialists in Michigan. So I worked with them. Um, and after, I guess during that, I was I think I had finished up actually at that time I had finished my law degree. So I didn't go to work as a lawyer immediately. I had basically gotten my
Okay.
law degree, taken the bar exam, but still was working with, you know, um, Shore Capital. I was actually flying out to Michigan every Sunday and stayed there from Sunday through Wednesday
Uh,
during the
wow.
process.
Yeah.
And Shore Capital ended up selling that investment to another private equity firm, and timing is everything. So right around that time, my partner from the physical therapy business reached out to me and said, "Hey, I heard that this local hospital system is selling their urgent cares." So they sold, they basically closed one of their locations and then sold the one to us. And then we took that and went from one office to five offices and sold that in 2015. Um, and that was very interesting because, in the physical therapy world, we were used to getting referrals from doctors. When we owned the occupational medicine business, we employed doctors. So it was
Yeah.
a little different.
Yeah, really interesting. Now going back to Shore Capital too, weren't they involved with ATI early on?
No, that was KRG Capital. So
Oh, that was KRG. Okay,
KRG
because
Capital bought ATI in 2005.
okay.
And then in 2006, KRG Capital purchased our practice and we became like the East Coast part of ATI.
Yeah, because I remember back that you called me back then when I was the CEO of Therapeutic Associates, and you said, "Hey, we've got this pretty good thing going here, this company called ATI, are you interested in jumping on board?" And so we didn't. And then as we know now, ATI became a behemoth, a PT practice, but seems like they've fallen on a little harder times lately. But anyway, just that struck my memory that you did call me way back when and brought that up.
Yeah, at that time, ATI was looking to grow and looking at for quality operators, which of course, your name came to mind, and I've reached out to you to see if you were interested in coming on board. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, it would have been a good move financially, I think. I think a lot of people did well with some of those early ATI transactions and so on. So anyway, but okay, so now you got into the urgent care business, built that up and sold it, and what's next?
so I guess chronologically, what was next was I started practicing some law, which
Okay.
I do to this day. I do employment law, plaintiff side employment law, but also represent some healthcare providers in contracting matters and things like that. And then just recently, got back involved with my former partner from Pro Physical Therapy and got involved with interim physical therapy.
Okay. And in the bio I kept referring it to as PRO physical therapy,
Well,
but it's pro
yeah,
physical therapy.
well, it was an acronym. So it
Mm.
was
Okay.
Professional Rehabilitation. Trying to think, it's been so long. Professional Rehabilitation Orthopedic Physical Therapy. That's what the PRO stood for. So
Okay.
we called ourselves Pro Physical Therapy. But also, like I said, during, well, I guess I want to say prior to teaming up with my former business partner in Interim, um, Shore Capital purchased a physical therapy group in California, and I want to say it was about 4 years ago. And I became a member of the board of directors for that business, and that was the platform. It's now called Therapy Partners Group, which has approximately 137 locations: California, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada.
Okay. And then tell us a little bit as a board member. So you sit on the board. Do you meet physically during the year? Is it just Zoom meetings? I'm just interested how that looks.
So we have 4 meetings, one per quarter. That we have 3 meetings in Chicago.
Hmm.
Where actually May, I think 22nd, I'll be going out to Chicago for my next board meeting. And we have one of the meetings in Naples, Florida during the winter. But the board gets together with the executive team and discusses all the issues that are, facing the business, growth opportunities, decisions, and um, it's very formal. We conduct, meetings, cover all aspects of the business, and then after the entire board meets with the executives, we have a non-executive session and discuss some more details, and then we have the executives reconvene and discuss our recommendations and things like that.
So if you don't mind me asking, do you get is that a paid position? Do you get paid, or do you get some equity in the company or some shares? How do they compensate you for your
Equity.
time? Equity. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool. All right. So do you enjoy that?
I do. I do. It's good to have an input and see how the business is growing. The business is growing tremendously, um, and it's something I enjoy. It reminds me of my days when I used to own physical therapy practice, but I'm not involved in any day-to-day operations. It's more or less
Right.
big picture things, I'll say.
So how does that company do that then with 137 locations? Do they kind of manage it centrally from Chicago and do that, or Does each clinic kind of operate somewhat independently, but just come together for some things? Tell us a little bit about the structure and what that looks like.
So there's executive offices in Chicago. There are there's a management structure where there's regional managers, clinic directors. Um, they don't do their own thing. It's very streamlined, organized, and orchestrated from Chicago with the executives. All
Yeah.
the executives are physical therapists. So it's not a bunch of business people, running a physical therapy practice. It's actually people who have been in the fields and have grown physical therapy practices before that are in charge of the management.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so and then so just looking at your career or your day to day now, how much are you doing um, law or compared to what you're doing in the physical therapy world? Just kind of give us a feel for what that looks like.
So I'm doing more in the law space. Um, I'm doing some work in the physical therapy space with interim, and a lot of that is related to billing and infrastructure. That we've opened up a couple locations and involved in getting everybody on board with credentialing, contracting, and uh, management metrics, things like that. But I would say that's probably a day and a half of my week.
Okay.
Um, the other part is, practicing law. But since I've sold the business, I managed to carve out some time for things other than work. I have three children, and one of them is a senior in high school, and one of them is my daughter is in kindergarten,
Oh,
and
wow.
their
There's a
son is
spread.
in first grade. So,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I certainly want to make sure that I have time for them as well.
So, interim physical therapy. So that's kind of a step back into how you started almost. I mean, so you own it and started it, or are you just working with a group and helping them along?
So my former business partner in pro physical therapy, Matt Haney, purchased a physical therapy practice in Florida
Okay.
at actually several locations, and he added, I want to say they're up to eight now. And he approached me about a year and a half ago and asking me if I'd be interested in joining with them, becoming a partner. And I said, yeah, of course. So
Okay.
we opened up, we purchased a location in Delaware and are and added a location in Delaware and are getting ready to open up another location. So a lot of my work has been targeted towards revenue cycle management and making sure that there's integration and best practices for billing collection, things like that.
So a lot of your career has been starting practices or growing practices and then selling them and you've done that multiple times, not only in the physical therapy space but also in other healthcare areas. So that seems to be your kind of niche a little bit, where you build them up and then you sell them. So uh, tell us a little bit about what's that like and what's the strategy and how do you start and then eventually sell it?
So I think I did leave out the DME experience. So
Yeah. Okay.
a partner and I uh, purchased a durable medical equipment business. And this business was, they did braces and what they call bent metal, which is walkers, wheelchairs, hospital beds, things like that,
Okay.
in addition to some pulmonary products. And that situation was, there was I guess, a family that had owned the business for 40 years. And the the owner had basically passed away and left the business to run to his wife and daughter, who they struggled. I mean, with it.
Yeah.
So this opportunity was brought to me by a friend who became, we became business partners, and it was just an opportunity where we looked at a business that was had a great reputation, had roots in the community, but hadn't grown. And I knew what I had done in physical therapy, and I'm like, well, this, a lot of parallels because it's all referral driven by physicians, and felt that that would be, an opportunity where we could grow and go from there, which we did. But we actually had different directions that we wanted to go in with the business. So ultimately, we decided that, well, maybe selling it is the best. But it was a good investment.
Yeah.
Um, but things like that is just a matter of finding the opportunity. I think it's very hard to start a business from scratch now. And where I think the better opportunity is if you can find a business that has, say, some roots, some infrastructure that you can take and take to the next level because the prior owners either didn't have the capacity or didn't want to do it.
Yeah. And when you look at the physical therapy world today, it's changed a lot over the 30 years you've, or maybe not that many, maybe 25 years you've been around it.
Mm.
So are you optimistic about the profession? Do you feel like it is a good investment still to get in there? How does your outlook on it changed, and what do you think about the future?
I don't think it's as a good investment as it was in years past. There's a lot of challenges that the industry faces. Number one, I think there's a labor challenge that in some markets it's very hard to get physical therapists because they're not making enough of them.
Yeah.
And reimbursement is a challenge. That we've had cost of living increases. The starting salaries for physical therapists have gone way up, and reimbursement has not kept pace with that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big challenge. And federally, there's been budget cuts which have resulted in reductions to Medicare, and sometimes when there's reductions to Medicare, other payers follow suit. So I think that there are some challenges, but it's still a business that you just need to do more volume. And physical therapy in all my experiences has been a volume business. That there's a difference between creating a business and creating a job for yourself. Um, and I think that in creating a business, you've got to be able to scale it. Um, and it's just nowadays you just need more volume to generate the kind of revenue or margins that we did in the past with fewer visits and fewer locations.
So, as a businessman now with multiple experience in a lot of different areas and buying and selling companies, um, you still look to me like a young man, so you still got a ways to go.
Maybe it's
So,
the filter on the.
so what are you looking for in the future? Is it more physical therapy business and companies and things like that, or do you think the opportunity is maybe in other businesses than physical therapy?
I think there are opportunities in physical therapy, and for me, potentially other healthcare related businesses. I like to stick with what I know. I mean, all the businesses that I had have been in the healthcare space. I've been approached by people who say, let's invest and do some development, and I'm like, I don't know enough about that. I want to stick to what I'm good at.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking, but I think that. There's one of these things that's come up around in this area. I don't know if it's in your area, but there's stretching businesses. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
familiar with the
Oh,
concept.
yeah. Stretch Lab and other.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting concept. I've also thought about it from the legal perspective too. It's like, well, are they infringing on the Physical Therapy Practice Act based on what they're doing?
Hmm.
But that strikes me as an interesting business, but I haven't looked that much into it. But that's related, to physical therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think that there's still potentially opportunities in DME, um, but haven't found one yet that's um, for sale that's appropriate.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't want to start one from scratch again, um, but yeah, I certainly think that there are still opportunities. I mean, I hear things from people about not being satisfied with some of the, I guess, experiences they have in the what I'll call big box physical therapy.
Yeah.
That there's a lack of local control. We used to get a lot of referrals from personal injury attorneys. And now that I'm back in the business, I still meet with personal injury attorneys for physical therapy referrals. And they've made many comments that it's not like it used to be. They've made references to at least the practices locally here in Pennsylvania and Delaware, where if we want an answer, we got to deal with someone in Chicago. Where
Yeah.
before it was very different. We could make decisions on the fly without having to go through some corporate hierarchy. So
Yeah.
um, I think that, and then there's a different sense when there's a sense of ownership. To me, it seems like the delivery of physical therapy is different.
How so?
Well, I mean, I know that when I was an owner in the business, I was very hands-on. I met with referral sources. I met with people that worked for me. Um, I had a vested interest. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about any other practices, but there's a level of interest that I think an owner has
Mhm.
that's different than a shareholder would have.
Yeah, what you're talking about is ownership mentality. I mean, it's no different if you own a house versus when you rent a house. You just care more about it. You're more willing to go the extras. You're more willing to do some things above and beyond because it's yours and you own it. And so, I think that that's an interesting way to look at it because in the private practice physical therapy world, obviously that's ownership usually. In a lot of the rest of the physical therapy world, there isn't ownership. And so, it's a dilemma because, I come from a system where ownership was a big deal and we had multiple owners and multiple people that were involved. But that really does limit you when you try and sell the practice or get a good return on investment because you're splitting up the pie a lot more ways. So there's pros and cons to both, but I hear what you're saying. I think ownership mentality is really key.
And I say this, I was actually going to a physical therapy practice to work out. That there's a physical therapy practice not too far from me, and they have a personal trainer there who basically sublets space. So I would go to this physical therapy practice and work out with this personal trainer. And there were things that I would notice, like dust, on the windowsills. There
Yeah.
was a snow shovel in the foyer um, that had stayed there along with a bag of salt well into the spring months. And it drove me crazy, like,
Yeah.
so I'm like, if this were my business, there wouldn't be that dust all over the place. I mean, because we wouldn't tolerate that. There wouldn't
Yeah.
be, but no one, I would walk past it and I'm thinking, one of these days management here is gonna, put that snow shovel away or gonna make sure that the cleaning people, dust. I mean, it's just to me a level of ownership that we would never have tolerated that. But where I was going, it just there, no one took ownership of that, and
Yeah.
it was a different experience for me.
Yeah. No, it's a factor. So now you're an attorney, you're a physical therapist, you're a business person. What's your identity? What do you feel more like PT in the PT world? Do you feel more like an attorney in the law world? Do you feel more like a business person, or how do you yeah what's your identity when you look at yourself?
I don't know. I think maybe I have a split personality because I mean, I'm a physical therapist to some people and I'm a lawyer to some people, but I don't know. I never really thought about it that way. I mean, I just know that I wear a couple different hats and, um, there's things that I do for the law. There's things I do for physical therapy, but I do think that my physical therapy, I'm sorry, my legal background has influenced the way I've done things, because I take a different look
Hmm.
at things, certainly compliance wise, and even in the HR realm that I look at, well, what's our potential exposure for this? So I do think like an attorney in some respects when I'm doing physical therapy, but I don't know, I guess maybe I probably would identify more as a physical therapist because that's where I came from. That's the business I grew. That's the thing I keep going back to, like I said, with my first business and then with my experience with Short Capital and now getting back into it with my former business partner. So if I had to say one identity, I guess it would be physical therapy.
Yeah. Well, let me ask it a different way then too. Where's your passion? I mean, when you get up in the morning, what excites you? Is it, is it physical therapy and the opportunities there? Is it more dealing with the law, or is it the business opportunities that are in front of you?
Well, I guess the first thing that excites me is like I wake my kids up every morning. Like that's my job in the household, that
Yeah,
to get the kids up and get them ready for school. And I play my kids a different song every morning, 'cause, introducing them to music. That's the first thing that excites me. But um, I think that the law does excite me because it's adversarial and it's challenging. When I was in high school, I used to wrestle, and that's like a one-on-one sport. It's not like soccer where everybody's participating. It's a one-on-one
yeah,
challenge, and a lot of the legal work that I do is one-on-one challenge where I'm advocating for, let's say, a plaintiff, and there's some attorney on the side who's working against me. So that does, I guess, excite me in a sense. I
yeah,
don't know if I would call it exciting, but it's something I like to do.
yeah. So you get the kids up in the morning. You say you play them a song to get them rolling, but you've got didn't you say from a kindergartner all the way to a high schooler? There's a wide range of music there. So how do you choose your song?
So, well, my high schooler, he goes to boarding school. He goes to Georgetown Prep in Bethesda, Maryland. So I don't get to wake him up in the morning.
Okay.
But the two younger ones, my son, who's 7 years old, then when I put him to bed at night, he'll tell me what song he wants.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Um, so he'll tell, like yesterday, it was Ruby Tuesday from the
Yeah.
Stones.
Wow.
Um,
7-year-old.
the
Wow.
day before
Okay.
that, it was Blackbird from the Beatles.
Okay.
Um, Today it was a surprise song. So they'll say, surprise me.
Yeah.
So today was New Radicals, You Get What You Give, if you've ever heard that.
Oh, yeah. That's a great song.
And then every now and then I let my daughter pick, but usually she doesn't want to. It's my son. So,
So where does this love of music come from? Are you a musician? Is it something you've always really craved, or how? It sounds like you know a lot about music, and then you're obviously sending it down the chain to those kids. So where's that come from?
so I don't know. It really comes from me listening to music, but and I can't play music. But my oldest son is a piano player, and my two youngest ones are now they just started piano lessons about a month ago.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
it's me, I guess, living vicariously through them because I never had the coordination to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. When I look back on my life, my mom, who did not play an instrument or was musical, but to her it was really important that each of her kids do that. And so my older sister, played the piano. And so, like, I'm in the third grade, and my mom says, "Okay, it's time for you to start taking piano." And I go, "Well, I don't really want to play the piano, but she goes, "Well, you got to play something." And I said, "Okay, I'll play the guitar." And she goes, "Okay." And to her credit, she took me down to the music store and bought me this cheap little old guitar and got some lessons going. And I play to this day. So it's a gift that I'm sure your kids are going to appreciate through their whole life, because I certainly have.
So are you in a band or anything, Steve?
Not in a band. I've stepped in with a band a very few times and played like one song with some guys I know or whatever. But I've never been in a band. Just play for myself and friends and family. But it's definitely something I love.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think it's a good investment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so tell us a little bit about this new physical therapy group that you're working with. So you said there's a piece of it down in Florida, and then you started a couple clinics up in the Delaware area.
hmm
So what's the plan there? You just gonna continue to grow those platforms and try and leverage them a bit?
Yeah, the plan is that I actually have an all-day meeting tomorrow. We've blocked out time to meet with different landlords and to check out different spaces for the next potential office. So that, and then we're doing some billing review with some of the claims but yeah, the plan is to take that and grow it hopefully in the same fashion that we did with pro physical therapy.
Yeah. So, and you look back with that college roommate, what was his name again? You mentioned him?
Amy.
Say it again.
Matt Haney.
Matt Haney. Okay. So you and Matt started early, right out of school and whatever, and partners. It sounds like you're still doing stuff quite a few years later. So, what is it about that partnership or relationship with Matt that makes you guys a good team?
I think that part of it is because we don't always agree.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
that not that disagreement generates, solutions and opportunities. I think that if everybody agreed, there probably wouldn't be much development. But the fact that as we went through the growth with the practice, there'd be in a number of different directions that we'd want to go in, a number of thoughts we would have, then we would, I don't want to say we'd butt heads, but we'd have very spirited disagreements. But the end result of our, conversations and challenges was, very beneficial because it took us to where we, were with, going from one office to 18 in a matter of 9 years. So.
Well, absolutely. I mean, diversity of opinion sometimes is great because you're not so tunnel of vision or focused on just one way. There's other ways to do things, and if you're open to that, then I think you see more opportunities than less.
But the other thing is that we complement each other because he's got, a skill set that I don't have, and I have, a skill set that he doesn't have. He's the
Yeah,
last thing that he's interested in is billing and looking at EOBs and trying to, figure out, where reimbursement hiccups are and things like that. I don't play golf. He's a very good golfer. He does, that was his job. He'd be out with the doctors, marketing. And we said that we both do things that the other person doesn't. So it's been a great complementary relationship. And then maybe that's why we've, stuck together for, I'll say we've been together, well, we've known each other since 1986, which is the year
yeah,
we went to college.
that's awesome. So you mentioned it earlier. We talked about ownership mentality, and when you have these physical therapy practices, I would imagine that they do better when you have a director who kind of gets the leadership thing and builds the business, but also helps his people improve in their abilities. So, do you guys do anything on the leadership training or the mentorship or anything like that to help those directors kind of get to the next level? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think that what we find is that many of the physical therapists who go to physical therapy school are, very knowledgeable in treating patients, but not so much on the business sense.
Yeah,
And that's one thing that we talk about as far as introducing them to, like, I'll just say KPIs, key performance indicators or metrics,
right.
things that we feel are important to run a business. Ultimately, we want to make everybody better, but there's, in terms of treatment skills, that's something completely separate. What we talk largely with is about management skills and the reasons why some of these metrics are important, um, reasons reasons why these are necessary to stay alive in today's business climate. And it's not always intuitive to some of the therapists, that we have to educate them as far as why this is important, and understanding about how reimbursement works, and that there's things like this, was it the MPPR, the Medicare multiple procedure
Right, right.
reduction, that like there's real things that impact you know your reimbursement. And there's codes that impact reimbursement. There's skilled codes, hands-on codes, and there's unskilled codes, and different codes reimburse differently. And um, there's a lot of the metrics that we impart to them, that these are necessary to for the success of a business. We talk about productivity levels, that there's defined expectations. How do you know when you need another therapist? How many patients can a therapist, be expected to treat? If you say, let's say that a therapist, I'm just making this up for illustration purposes, let's say it's 2 patients an hour, right? Which in an 8-hour day, that would be 16 patients. If the therapist is seeing 14 patients a day, that's very productive, right? But it doesn't leave much room for growth. Then in that, you only have 2 available slots, in an 8-hour day if the therapist is seeing 14. So there's a level at which we need to determine when should we bring on that next therapist. How do we manage scheduling? Um, how's your front desk managing scheduling? One thing that I never like to hear is when a patient comes, to the office and the front desk says, "When would you like to come back in?"
Yeah.
No, we don't want that. We want them to come in, doctors 3 times a week, or the therapist, says that you need to come. That's when we want you to come back in. Or if someone calls for a new appointment, like a new referral that they've gotten referred from their doctor, we don't want the front desk to say, "When would you like to schedule?" We'd like to say, "We've got an opening today. Come on in." So it's paying attention to some of those details that that the front desk in terms of I'm sorry, the therapist in terms of management has to be on top of what the front desk is doing and understand the front desk's role and understand how certain things, just like something as simple as saying when you want to come in, how that could negatively impact the clinic's volume.
Yeah.
So there's, I guess, a lot of things like that that we incorporate into our management training, that making sure that you know what the front desk role is, make sure you know what they're doing, and make sure that you know how this can potentially impact, the clinic.
So, Frank, if I'm a newer professional and I have a few clinics in the private practice world and I want to grow it a little bit and leverage it a little bit and have more sites and give me more opportunities in the future, what would you say is the most important thing to focus on? Because we get very distracted with so many things going on. So, if you were to give somebody some advice to what should you focus on most, what would it be?
So if I understand your question correctly, you're saying like if a private practice owner is interested in opening up a new clinic.
Or let's say yes, or let's say they have one or two offices, but they want to get to 8 or 10.
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing, well, let me just say it. Let me not rank it. I think an important thing is the power and value of relationships. When
Yeah,
you're opening up a new clinic, one of the things that we did was we didn't just build it and hope they come. We talked to a referral source and say, "We're thinking about opening up an office in this area. We think there's a need there. Can we count on your support?" You know, so I think that uh, relationships, the power and value of relationships is tremendous, and that the therapist or manager or owner needs to understand that. And I would think that if you're in private practice, you already do understand that.
yeah,
But I think that that's very important. I think that the I guess understanding the contracting world, understanding like
yeah,
how contracts can affect your business. I know there's some contracts that have these things called silent PPOs where you can end up taking a lot of reductions because you participate with one insurance company. Um, I think that in getting from, let's say, if you're saying like 8 to 10 patients to more, right? That's what you said. Like if they're
yeah,
seeing, I
yeah,
think that the people, that who are providing the services, um, it's very, very important to make sure that, you've got people that you can trust to deliver, quality service. One of the things I think is most important is the patient experience, you know, that we want patients to come and get better. We like them to have an experience that they can't get at home, you know,
yeah, yeah,
that it's very important for the therapist to place their hands on people. Um, I think that it's differentiating yourself in the marketplace, doing things that other people aren't doing. But again, I mean, all this stuff to me seems intuitive, that a practice would be doing already. I mean, and I think
yeah,
ultimately, what is the goal, right? Is your goal to have something that's scalable and, replicable, or is it just to keep yourself employed? Because I think that there's a big distinction between creating a job and creating a business. And again,
yeah.
I don't even know if I'm answering your question.
No, no, you are, and I think what you're saying there, and you're speaking my language because I believe it too. It's relationships, 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 and relationships go from getting to know referral sources and building relationships. It's getting to be known in your community and building relationships, but it's also building relationships with your patients, giving them that experience that is is unique and different and better than most. And so those are all relationship oriented things. And I would say it probably is intuitive, but I don't think we can assume everybody gets it or everybody focuses on it like others do. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
That's true. That's
You
true.
know, and
Yeah.
so I do think that another thing that comes to mind too for me is that I do think you need to go into a business or a private practice um, ownership thing for the right reasons. And I think people don't always do that. I think they, like you said, that they go into, well, I'm going to start my own practice because I don't want to work for anybody else, or I want to work my own hours, or I want to make all the decisions. Well, those aren't the right reasons. I mean, the reason to build a business or go into a private practice is to create something that's better than others are doing it, and there's an opportunity in the community and helping the community and finding people that want to learn and grow and helping them do that. Those are the kind of things I think that are drivers for successful business people.
I also think that it's very important in a practice to have consistency to make sure that the product that you're delivering is consistent. Just like, I think if you look at a McDonald's, you can count on getting the same type of hamburger each time you go. Um, to have expectations as far as this is how we're going to communicate with patients, here's how we're going to communicate with attorneys, here's how we're going to communicate with physicians, because all those things matter. And when you have inconsistency of treatment, um, that I think doesn't lead to a uniform product.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Frank, in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you, or what haven't we talked about that you think we should get into the program today?
Oh, geez, Steve. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I, I don't know that there's any specific, like, say, recipe for success. I think there's multiple different recipes for success. Um, you know, and I'm kind of, I guess, drawing a blank in the sense that, um, I think that it's very important for, you need to go into the practice for the right reasons, um, and to, think about, I think the exit in mind, you know,
Yeah,
um, where do you want to end up? Where do you
yeah,
want to be? Because, at some point, right, you know, you're, you're not going to do this forever, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
I think it's very important to, when you start to plan a practice, or even if you're in practice already, so think where do I want to end up, and how am I going to get there? I think it's very important. Succession planning, or looking at an end. Do I have something that's saleable? You know, how do you value your business? What is your retirement plan? What is your exit plan? I mean, look, you can invest in 401ks and things like that, but if you are in private practice, ideally, I would think that you want to have an asset that you can sell. Is it saleable? Is there a market for your practice? And I think that's also very important if you have partners too, because people might have different life cycles in terms of when they want to exit and where they want to go, and how do you want to do it. I think it's very important to have that level of understanding in the beginning, to know that, hey, if there comes to be a point down the road where we want to sell, is it possible to get everybody on board,
yeah,
how many partners. So I think that's very important to make sure that you're planning appropriately for, an end or an exit, because at some point I think it will happen.
yeah. No, you make a really good point, and I have seen personally people that haven't had that thought process or discussion with anyone, and then they get to the point where they're kind of done or they want to be done, and they don't know where to go. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what the options are. They haven't really thought through how this is going to work. And continuing to work as hard as we do when you're kind of done, mentally, to me is misery. So I think that you make a really good point that you need to think of these things early on. And it kind of even goes back to, as a CEO of a company, I learned early on that the best thing you can do early on is to figure out what your succession plan is, because who's going to take your place, and how do you prepare that person, and how's it going to look, and when's it going to happen. All those things are important because they take time, and you kind of have to go through the process to do it right.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and the other thing, since I just put my attorney hat on, which I think is also important, is to have an understanding of human resources,
Yeah.
because I've seen, situations where people end up getting, sued for employment decisions they've made. Um,
Mhm.
for example, there's certain people that, in the eyes of the law, are exempt from overtime, and other people that are not exempt from overtime. And failure to pay someone overtime can be very costly.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I'm
know,
sure. I'm sure that's true.
that's
Yeah.
one of the things that, in my practice of law, I've filed several class action suits against companies for failure to pay overtime. And on an individual person basis, it's not a lot. But when you talk about 300 employees that you're filing a suit on behalf of, it become very, very expensive,
Yeah.
depending on things. So I think, when we're talking about things that are important to a private practice owner, insulating yourself from liability or avoiding liability, and potentially having the right insurance in place. There's a policy called Employment Practices Liability Insurance, which will defend against any claim of wrongful termination, discrimination, things like that. So I think that's and also an important consideration in making sure that, yes, you've got a succession plan, but let's talk about our operation plan, make sure that we're covered from a legal perspective to make sure that, because employees are the backbone of any physical therapy business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's all physical therapy is very labor driven. A
Yeah.
patient comes in for service. The therapist provide it. You've got front desk people, you've got technicians, aides, things like that. It's more people intensive than it is equipment intensive. And anytime that you got people, there's potential challenges. When I was in business, way back when, I used to think about there's three challenges that every physical therapy business has. Number one is getting patients in the door. Number two is getting paid for those visits. And number three is HR people, staffing issues.
Yeah. 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 Good points. Good points. So, when you look at your career, as we've discussed, it's you got a lot of different ways that it's gone, and a lot of different directions you've been on this journey. What You can't say your kids or your family. So, what is the proudest moment that you can think of in your career that you've done that you're the proudest of?
Um, I think that, the proudest thing would be is actually taking that plunge into private practice. When I graduated PT school, I worked for a hospital system, and I worked 9 to 5, and I had a guaranteed paycheck, and when I started the physical therapy practice, I didn't have any guarantees. I had money that I initially borrowed from my parents, but that was a big step to know that I was going from, an income that I could count on to an income where maybe if I'm not successful, I might end up owing a lot of money, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So I think that was
yeah,
just and the fact that we were successful in, being able to open up, that first office and then hiring additional employees and opening up a next office. So I'd have to say that, taking that plunge, to go from
yeah,
working for a system to doing my own thing, um,
yeah,
I guess a proud moment because, my life would have been very different had I not.
yeah. It's a big risk, but it was a big risk with a high reward. So that's for sure. So, Frank, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Okay, in relationship to leadership, um, well, I think that's maybe there's several pearls here in this answer, but one thing I think about what the role of management is. And the role of management is not to discipline employees. I mean, discipline is a function, but the role of management is to make your employees the best employees they can be, is to aid and assist your employees in growing and developing. And I think communication, making sure that you're communicating to those people in, I'll say, in an effective manner, but you have to be able to, what do you say, read the room, and
Yeah.
understand the audience.
Yeah.
I think that leadership involves, being able to effectively communicate with people, um, help, and encourage them to be the best possible employee they could be, manage, helping them grow. Recognizing that you have people that are depending on you, because their livelihood depends on the leadership of the company. If the
Yeah.
company's not growing, then their livelihoods are at stake. And it's very important to recognize that there are insecurities with people. Like if they see certain things, um, if they see that the company's growing, um, hopefully, that they feel that they're connected to it and they're part of it. But certainly that gives a sense of security, when there's, I guess, turmoil, um, that doesn't necessarily lead to longevity with an employee. Um, the employees, are the basically the backbone of the company, and it's like I said, without physical therapy is nothing without people. So I
Yeah.
think it's very very important to recognize. But that, like I said, the role of a leader is to manage and develop its employees.
Yeah. 100%. Well, Frank, this has been a real pleasure. It's as we mentioned earlier, we kind of rubbed elbows and hung out together, and we're on some boards together and whatever way back when, and kind of lost track of you a little bit. So it was really great to reconnect and hear what you're doing and all the great things that are happening. So I've really enjoyed our discussion today, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, I'll have to look for you at the next PPS convention, which I
Y-
say I'm going to. Uh,
Yeah,
and I'm sure after we disconnect here, I'll probably think of a few more pearls. But
yeah,
anyway,
that's okay.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll bump into each other down the road. So have a good rest of your day, and thanks for being on.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye bye.
All right.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.